So today's video, as you've probably seen from the thumbnail, is about how to make your barbells better. What we're looking at now is a Rogue bar. I think at the time it was called the Rogue bar. Right now they've brought out a kind of Rogue bar 2.0, but this is a bar bought in 2013. It's had a fairly tough life, I think it's fair to say. So I've just brought it with me everywhere I've lived. Then when I had the gym, it used to live in the gym and get a fair bit of commercial work. So I think compared to a lot of other barbells, like unless it was in a CrossFit gym, they wouldn't have gotten this same kind of wear and tear. You'll see it doesn't really spin at all. Like this is after like spending around 5 or 10 minutes with it that morning trying to get it to move, and this is what we end up getting it to spin like at the end of the day. So for just a quick bit of work, like probably what took me around an hour, you can really make your own barbell a lot better. You'll see there's like plenty rust on the knurling. We're going to be taking that off. You'll see even there's some tape where at one point it was used to keep the bar on. So this is what Rogue sell at the moment. It's like a Rogue 2.0, and that's just the old order form for the bar. So I originally ordered this bar. For those of you who've been listening to the podcast, you probably remember talking about this. I ordered it to France. So you used to be able to ship things from Rogue to France a lot cheaper. And that's what that little pop-up on screen there was. But yeah, so this is a 230 back squat the first time I did it. That's with this barbell as well. Really good bar for that. Like the steel in it is great. There's some heavier lifts here. So this is a 240 deadlift from deficit. One thing, even after the last 8 years of lifting and some like reasonably heavy, by no means like very heavy, but reasonably heavy lifts, the bar is still fully straight. It's a 115 snatch. There might be some more. There's a 140 something kilo clean and jerk, or jerk from block, sorry. So it's just kind of testament to the quality of the steel that's in that bar and just the engineering that's in the sleeves. Obviously it just needs a bit of TLC now. So the first thing, take the sleeves off the end. You need a circlip pliers for this. When you're buying a circlip pliers for a barbell, you need just one of the standard ones. So as you squeeze it, it will close the jaws. As you open the handle, it will open the jaws. Don't get a reversible one or like a multi-use one. Just get the bog standard circlip pliers. You won't be able to do this with anything else. So don't try and kind of like hold two screws and clamp them with a vice grip. It just won't work. One thing you'll notice here is there's quite a bit of wear on that split ring. So that's supposed to be a split ring. So it's a washer, then a split ring, then a washer on the inside again. And the whole kind of aim now, so obviously getting the rust off the knurling will really help, like just using the bar. But the whole aim is fixing up those bearing surfaces. So you have a bearing out towards the end, out where that kind of those washers in the split ring are, and then you have a bearing just on this end you see here. So like the closest end to the middle of the bar. Both of those are brass or some sort of metal like that. What we're going to be doing today is truing up the kind of bearing surfaces, taking off any kind of rough edges, and it will allow the bar to spin a hell of a lot better. That combined with some ample lubrication will really, really help. So you'll notice there's two different kinds of circlips. The one on the outside is just to hold your end plate on, and then you've a more of a heavy duty one on the inside. Make sure you put them back on in the right order. And these are just showing you again that kind of split ring and the two washer system. The gouges in the split ring are fairly significant. So obviously like gouges from the bar spinning and landing over the course of 8 years. It just takes away a bit more metal each time, and we'll be truing up those edges. The good thing here is you'll see a lot of the bearing surface on the bar itself is pretty good. You have some pitting there. And what that's from is, even in like a temperature controlled environment, when the bar heats up and cools down, the air that exists within the sleeve will condense. So if you just leave your bar in a normal gym overnight, but particularly if you're in like a shed, or you leave your bar like out behind the house or something, even if it's not raining on it, that condensation will come inside the sleeve. And you'll see we'll use a silicone lube later on, which will kind of keep that air out of there, and it will stop the condensation forming on the inside. So that's the main thing that really affects the bar spinning. This is just cleaning off the knurling. Start off with a wire brush. To be honest, a wire brush and an angle grinder is much much quicker. It does a The job isn't as good. So obviously, a grinder is spinning the wire brush around in a circle, and if you imagine your knurling is kind of a diamond pattern, so it's lines going across each other in a kind of diagonal pattern. So a wire brush, if you did two passes, kind of one 45 degrees to the line of the bar and then another one 90 degrees to that, you would get a bit deeper into it. But the grinder is just so much quicker. So the bar really does clean up quite well just with 2 or 3 minutes of a wire brush, especially if you just have that loose rust on the outside. Like, I still have a good depth of the knurling left here. This is brake and clutch cleaner. Um, so a lot of time you'll see people using like something like a WD-40, like a penetrating oil on their barbells. That leaves this slick, kind of greasy, lubed surface, which is terrible on your knurling. Brake and clutch cleaner, you literally see it evaporating off in front of your eyes there. That's what you want to be using to wash that rust out from within the kind of gaps in the knurling. Just like clearing off the surface here, like most of the lube has gone off that from ages ago. You'll see some of the pitting there, kind of just under my hand. So what we're going to do is, for all the bearing surfaces today, we're going to true them up, so get them as close to square and straight as possible. When it's out on the edge of the barbell like this, where it will be under load, you really have to be careful. So you don't want to be going too hard at it. This is like 000 steel wool, so it's a very very light abrasive. You could also use extra fine sandpaper. So like wet and dry steel sandpaper would work quite well for this, but you have to be really careful. So this is where you'll end up messing up the actual surface of the bar. The amount of pitting you have on it, it will just depend how old the bar is. This bar is quite old and there's a bit of pitting, but it's not excessive. So just a few minutes on some steel wool, particularly if you could get maybe like an 800 grit sandpaper, that'd be really really good. But steel wool works perfectly for this. In the middle where I'm doing it now, you'll see giving a quick pass, and you'll see those kind of patches of pitting. That doesn't matter as much. Like, that's a pretty much free space in the middle. Nothing's touching there. It's better just clear it off, because if you do get like oxidized metal in there, it might start to dust and to flake, and it can go onto a bearing surface. But it's not as important as the two ends underneath the sleeve. So just like a quick pass will do it perfectly. Just where the pitting is a small bit more serious here. So the media, or the inside of the collar, there's a bit more serious pitting. A wire brush does work well. It will just get into the deeper stuff a small bit better. But obviously just being very, very careful. Like, we won't get the grinder to this. Just a light pass over with a wire brush just to get into that pitting a small bit better. The thing you need to think about is, like, the more pitting you leave there, that won't go away, and it will just kind of keep rotting. So you're trying to stop the rot here with that rust as much as you can. So this is the end piece of the bar. They probably weigh like 8 or 9 kilos each, maybe. And you'll see there's actually, so the wider piece to stop the plates sliding to the inside has moved slightly. And this is something that will just happen in older bars. As far as I know, they're friction welded onto the barbell. So they spin up that outer piece very, very quickly, and then put the inside piece into it, or vice versa. Or else maybe they heat the outside piece up so it expands and then fit it over. One of those two ways. It looks like it's after moving here like a few thousandths of an inch. It's not a big deal. There's absolutely no movement in it. You could whack it with a hammer and it won't move. If you're doing like a full refurb of this, you could take it in on a lathe, but there's no reason to do that. You'll just see me on the bearing surface there, so the actual bushing. That's what the bushing bar is named after. You'll see the edge of that had gone quite rough, so just a chainsaw file, run around the edge, take the rough edge off it. You're trying to make everything straight, just make sure you have no kind of jagged edges, because that will slow down the spin of the bar. Just a bit of that brake cleaner then again, just to see where you need to go over it. One thing, if you are using a file like this, that filed surface can't really be the end surface you leave spinning a barbell on, because it's just a bit too rough. So that extra fine steel wool again, just to take that, you'll just see like those scrape marks from the filer being taken down. In terms of, you'll just see me like scraping over the edge here, just clean off the edge. You really don't need to do that. You do need to clean off those rough edges on the bearing surface, but like on the flat surface of your bear, I think mine is quite dirty out there because my grip goes the whole way out to the edge. So you'll definitely have sweat and chalk accumulating on that flat circular surface, but it's no big deal. This is probably one of the most important things in the video. This is lithium grease, or white lithium grease. This is what you want for your barbell. There's a few different things. I know Garth likes using copper grease. Very, very similar product. What you basically want is some sort of low speed gear oil. So you want something that's going to stay there. This will help in a number of ways. So obviously it'll lubricate underneath the two bearing surfaces or bushing surfaces. But what it'll also do is extrude a lot of that air, or make sure there's not as much room for air inside in the barbell. Most of this grease, like if you take this off in a few years' time, will have actually stayed inside the bar. And it also gives you some rust protection as well. So just as we slide the bar on here, or the end sleeve, you'll see how well it spins just now. So it's nice, loose, it's really, really smooth. And that's like, this is part one of making sure your bar will spin well. What you have here then is your stir clips, your two washers, your split ring, and then your end cap. First thing I'm doing, putting them all into paint stripper. So this has probably been serviced 3 times in its lifespan so far. So there's different greases kind of built up inside there. Paint stripper works really well to take it out. Then use methylated spirits, which is that purple stuff, to clean that off. The main thing with these washers, not so much with the end plates. The end plates, you just want to clean them off so they kind of don't interfere with anything. But with the washers and with the split pin, or with the split washer, you really need to make sure your surfaces are trued up and straight. So if you imagine where there's gouges into that split ring, or where there's gouges into those washers, that's just going to be more surface area for the barbell to catch on as it's spinning. So what we're doing now is just cleaning the grease and kind of crap off them, check what kind of gouges there are out of those, and then we'll start truing up those surfaces, just making sure they're like really, really easy to spin on.
I've shot the Montex for a very long time. I like that. I just started messing around a little bit with a bunch of different tube blades, because just hunting in Australia, quite often we would use tube blades over there. I go through, and I'm sure a lot of hunters do this, like you go through this phase of like going and following all the trends and trying all. I would say 99.99% of the time.
Right, so part one of making sure everything is really straight and like kind of true surfaces is you need to make sure you're obviously sanding or truing those off on a straight surface. So it's just a piece of MDF that I know is pretty straight. 400 grit wet and dry sandpaper, spray both sides with spray adhesive, and then just lay them down. You can clamp that to the bench. This is just the easiest way of making sure something is actually flat. When you're doing the washers, make sure it is in a figure of 8 you do them. So if you just go over and back, you'll end up wearing the kind of front side and the back side a lot more than you will the center. On the ones that are actually bad, you'll see me taking out a whetstone and straightening on them on the whetstone first. The grit on that is just slightly more aggressive than the grit on that sandpaper. So once I take out the kind of big bits with that split or with the whetstone, you can put it back onto the sandpaper then and get a much better surface. So you'll see that the level of finish on that is better already.
Flat spot. Now they will obviously bed in some steep, gnarly stuff, but for the most part, a lot of their bedding is going to be, they can look down, but they like the wind at their back. So what I do is I look at the topography and say, where's a good bedding area? And then I go, okay, which way is the predominant wind? And is there enough cover in there that they're out of the sun? And then I go, okay, pinpoint that, because that's where I mean, they'll still hunt.
This might look pretty labor intensive. Realistically, the whole thing probably took me like an hour to do, or 45 minutes to do. this stuff with the washers and the split rings and stuff, this really does make a huge difference. So you might get the kind of edges cleaned off, or the bar itself cleaned off, and the knurling done, and some of the bearing surfaces trued up in maybe 15 minutes. The stuff with the washers takes a lot more, and like you'll see it on that split ring, just how gouged out that piece is. So that's another time. Get out the whetstone, and I'll end up doing, I'd say, pretty much all of those split rings on the whetstone first. There's just a lot of wear. Obviously, when you're on the whetstone, you're taking off more material, so you need to be sure you're holding it kind of flat and steady. But the process itself is pretty simple. Obviously, then you can't leave that whetstone surface as your kind of finished surface, just onto your sandpaper again. At this point, that sheet of 400 has been through a good bit. It wasn't a brand new sheet to start off with, so you're probably way up beyond 400 now in terms of the level of grit on that piece. Right, so this is the kind of finished product. Once you get it all put back together, spins really freely, no noise when it's spinning at all. There's no kind of rattle in the bar. It spins straight. So that's just a kind of brief note on what you can do.